Hi everyone, my name's Ash Harrier and I'm here to tell you a little bit about my book, The Deadly Daylight. The Deadly Daylight is an amateur sleuth story about 12-year-old Alice England who's been born and raised in a funeral home, so she's very comfortable around the dead. Alice has a special gift that helps her solve mysteries, and I would like to read to you from the first chapter to give you a bit of an idea of what it's about. The first chapter is called The Resonance of Trinkets. Alice smoothed down the dead woman's collar. Her father often missed that detail. He prepared and dressed the bodies, but didn't always notice things like misbuttoned blouses or crooked spectacles. There were 2 items for Alice to arrange. They were inside an envelope with the name Edna McIntosh written on the front. Alice slipped out a pair of square-cut diamond earrings set in silver, and a photograph of a man dressed in clothing from the 1970s, flared trousers and a shirt with a wide collar, held in a black frame. She removed a gold stud from Edna's left ear and replaced it with one of the ugly diamonds. But when she came to the right earlobe, there was no earring to replace. Managing the pen awkwardly in her latex gloves, she made a note about it on the envelope. Her dad would need to mention it to Edna's next of kin, as grieving families sometimes made wild accusations when jewellery was misplaced. Alice tried to insert the diamond earring, but it wouldn't go in. Edna's earring must have been missing for a while, and the pierced skin had grown over before she died. Alice considered her options. She could cut off the earring's stem and use costume glue to stick the diamond to Edna's ear, but that was risky. Occasionally the glue failed. All it would take is a grieving guest to stroke Edna's hair and the earring might fall off. A mishap like that could ruin the funeral. And what if the relatives changed their minds and asked for the earrings to be returned? Alice didn't want to be responsible for any damage if someone noticed dear Granny's earrings were real diamonds and wanted them back. Her only option was to re-pierce Edna's earlobe. Piercing an ear was new to Alice, but she didn't want to fetch her dad to do it. He had already spent long hours embalming Edna and then bending her arm into a suitable position to hold the photo frame. It would be silly to call him for such a simple task. "This shouldn't hurt at all," Alice assured Edna, because you couldn't be too careful. The earring stem went easily through Edna's earlobe, like pushing a toothpick into an olive. Alice surveyed her work. Not bad. It was slightly off-centre compared with the left one, but no one would notice. Now for the photo. Sometimes dead people's possessions shared stories with Alice. Not always, but every so often, an object put a little story into her head. Alice called these items resonant, an excellent word she had discovered when she was about 9, meaning anything that gave an ongoing hum. That was what it felt like to Alice, like the item was humming and vibrating with meaning and significance. Sometimes it was just a little sliver of a story, and sometimes it was a full history of the person's life. This photograph was resonant. Alice held it, absorbing the story. Edna had been a married woman, and the man in the photo was her husband, Frank. He'd been quite a stern man, although considerate of Edna. He was a soldier in a war somewhere in Asia and had died of a feverish illness in a canvas field hospital many decades before. He'd tried to write a final letter to Edna before he died, but was too weak even to hold the pencil. Edna had loved this photo of Frank, looking relaxed on his porch, and always kept it on the shelf in the home where she took her last breath just a week before. "How are you getting along?" When he was in the funeral section of their home, Alice's father, Thaddeus, always moved quietly. It was fitting as an undertaker, he'd told her once. However, Alice was never startled by his sudden arrivals. "Nearly finished," she replied. Thaddeus stood by Edna's polished dark blue shoes. He was tall and slightly hunched at the shoulders. Alice had heard people describe her dad as a haunting figure, and she found that unfair. Yes, his face had a pale, mournful appearance, but couldn't everyone see the twinkle of humour in his eyes? And yes, he did have long, thin fingers, but you needed to have strong hands if you worked with dead bodies. there was a lot of massaging of stiff limbs required. And perhaps he did have a low voice, like a ship's distant horn, but that was just right for someone who spoke to bereaved families all day. Alice manoeuvred the photo frame into Edna's hand, sliding it under the woman's wrist. She slotted it into the fingers her father had curled into a gentle gripping position and tilted the frame at a more poignant angle. Poignant was another of those wonderful words she had discovered in more recent times. It meant something that was so sad that it almost made you a tiny bit happy. People often used it to describe Alice's arrangement of trinkets with the corpses, which made her proud. She did a final check of the cuffs, makeup, hair, and position of the wedding band. Then she stepped back and nodded at her father. All done. Lovely. Her father pulled a sheet across the coffin to protect Edna from bugs and dirt. Dinner's on the stove. Do you have any homework?